Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to another episode of The Ways We Move, the podcast that highlights innovative mobility solutions and the people behind them. I am your host, Nicolas Zart, and I bring in 20 years of experience in electric mobility from electric vehicles on the road to AAM, advanced air mobility in the air. And of course, at some point, we'll have enough people to even talk about electric boats. And I also hope railroads because, well, they were the first ones to really go full steam ahead, no pun intended, with electricity. And today, can you guess if you've been watching this podcast for a while? You'll know that I'm pretty enthusiastic in general. I have another special guest today. And truly I can say special guest. And if you see this, you might kind of get an idea where he is. Today, we talk to Angelo Collins, who is the new executive director after Mike Hirschberg has, as of yesterday, left the Vertical Flight Society. Well, left working there, but still very present and will continue to be present. Now, my relationship with the Vertical Flight Society, or VFS for short, is long and fruitful. In 2014, when I switched over from electric vehicles to what we then called electric air mobility, one of the first things I've noticed is that this VFS group, this nonprofit, was very active promoting advanced air mobility. Well, of course, at the time, we didn't call it like that. We just called it electric air mobility. In fact, we really only used two terms: UAM, urban air mobility, and eVTOLs, electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. And with Mike, we had a lot of discussions about what to use, what terms to use. And we, of course, spoke of vertiports. And of course, back then it was pretty naive. We thought about jumping from building top to building top, eventually landing on a parking lot somewhere, and eventually getting to airports. Now, of course, as things mature and technology always gets better, battery technology gets better, energy density shrinks, power density shrinks, meaning how much energy and power you can put within a given weight and volume of a battery. All of a sudden, regional air mobility became a possibility. And it was right around that point in 2017 that NASA decided to give it a different name for this UAM eVTOL vertiport trio we were talking about. And they came up with advanced air mobility. Not everybody likes that term because the original idea of advanced air mobility, AAM, also includes hypersonic hydrogen flight. Of course, over here, well, we do mostly electric flight. In fact, we do electric mobility. So the Europeans came up with an interesting way or an interesting twist on it. They call it innovative air mobility. And I kind of like this. I think I'm going to switch over to that one slowly because it means that you keep on innovating. Advanced air mobility, once it's there, is it still advanced? Because, well, it becomes a de facto or a standard, right? Anyway, potatoes, potatoes, that's the communicator in me. Today, we are going to talk to Angela. We're going to find out a lot of interesting things about this person. First of all, I like him a lot. He is the right person to take over the wonderful work that Mike Hirschberg has done for VFS, and also how much VFS has promoted electric vertical flight. But we're going to find out a little bit more about not only where he comes from, because he's got a really great past, and this guy really understands VTOL, vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. He also has a monumental task to continue the momentum going forward without neglecting the base. So we will hear a little bit about what he is doing, where he came from, what he is doing. And you're going to find out a really interesting tidbit about Angelo, especially in his early years, where he was heading in a very, very different direction. Anyway, hope this entices you to watch and continue watching and hearing this. Again, please like, share, and subscribe. That is very important to us. We offer all of this for free to you. We are now open to sponsorships, of course, so we would be very happy to sponsor your episodes if you are inclined to do so. And write comments. Tell us, what do you think advanced air mobility is? What does it mean, electric mobility, to you? Do you drive an EV? Do you want to talk about it? We'd be happy to talk to you guys about it. Are you building an electric boat? Are you converting an electric boat? And mostly also, do you drive a train? Do you drive an electric train, even a hybrid? We want to hear from you guys. So without further ado, let's hear from our good friend, Angelo. Angelo, welcome to The Ways We Move. Please introduce yourself. Who is Angelo?
Yeah, so it's great to be here, and thanks for inviting me, Mr. Zart.
Absolutely.
So I'm the executive director of the Vertical Flight Society. We've been around since 1943, so we're pushing 82 years, right? I'm the seventh executive director of VFS.
Wow.
Took over in June of 2023.
That's
I'm an
great.
aerospace engineer by trade. I studied at the University of Maryland, and I got my master's at Virginia Tech, but this was an engineering management type degree. And it's very fitting right now in running a nonprofit. I didn't know getting handed over the keys. Like, all right, this is a nonprofit, but this is a business. You have to handle payroll, taxes, audits. But that's been a fun element of it. My career was primarily in support to DARPA. I started working there as an intern, and and so I'd say at least 10 total years of my career was at supporting DARPA fun projects. Some in the skiff, some fairly public, some a decent amount of eVTOL programs, which is particularly relevant to my current role as executive director of VFS, and also worked on the F-35 program in the JPO, did
Wow.
S&T for them, and also worked for the Office of Naval Research. And a decent part of that time, as well as some time at DARPA, was working on uncrewed, optionally piloted helicopter type programs, incorporating autonomy and sensing capabilities to help augment a pilot or uncrew a helicopter, decrew a helicopter. And
Right.
those are efforts that are still ongoing, but there's a lot of potential there. Yeah. Beyond that, I think that's more or less my background, I suppose.
Which is perfect. I mean, it fits
Yeah.
really well with the whole idea of VFS. For those who might not know what VFS is, the Vertical Flight Society, tell us a little bit about what VFS does and what its presence is, and how important it is, especially when it comes to advanced air mobility.
Yeah. So we're a professional technical society. We're a society of members, and a decent number of them are engineers, but you don't have to be an engineer to be a member. Igor Sikorsky
Yep,
wasn't a traditional engineer, who got an engineering degree, but was one of our
it's
founding
true.
members. And so we've been around, as I said, since 1943. We were founded in Stratford, Connecticut, when the conventional helicopter effectively took off and went into production. Um, we have we have about 6,000 members, and we're an international society. We have chapters,
Yep.
just like any other association. We have chapters, student chapters, regional chapters. We have a technical council of subject matter experts and organized into different committees: aeromechanics, acoustics, safety, and one of their roles would be to help review papers, abstracts, because we are a publishing arm. Like many other
That's right.
nonprofits, we're a venue for publication, whether it's through our annual forum that brings anywhere from 11 to 1,300 people every year. And we have maybe upwards of 250 to 300 published authors
Yes.
that present their work there. Um, in addition to that, we're a STEM society. We offer STEM opportunities for students, competitions, the student design competition, as well as design build vertical flight. That's a drone competition. And we give out scholarships. We give out now $130,000 scholarships every year, and that's continuing to
Wow.
grow. We have a wonderful and generous base of members, a niche core group of tremendous folks, and they've been very generous with their funds and to support the vertical flight community and the younger crew. And it's fun to watch the evolution of a VFF, Vertical Flight Foundation recipient, go through their career. Maybe they become a professor, maybe they're a chief engineer at Bell, and they become a fellow. And a lot of that catalyst started through VFS and what we could provide
Yep.
to get them to that point, and help, of course, the entire industry. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible for those who actually want to get involved in advanced air mobility. I always tell them check out VFS, and that's the first one I talk about because you do have, my gosh, your publications. You could spend a whole lifetime reading everything. You do have also two great publications, Vertiflight and also the technical Wow, the technical one, which I never went through it,
The
that is
journal. We
way
have the
the
journal,
journal is way over my
which is
head. This is
quarterly.
like pure engineering geek out dumb or geekdom, and it's really impressive what you guys have under your belt and what you guys offer. So obviously, something I tell everybody automatically. But there's something really interesting also that although you are vertical flight and you are vertical flight, so we think of helicopters, obviously, something happened late 2000s or something like that. You started embracing the unknown. You started embracing electric vertical flight. So tell us a little bit about that. That's pretty. You guys were one of the very early precursors there.
Yeah, and if we could go back in time, I don't know if we would have done things a little differently. Not necessarily VFS, but this entire community,
Yeah.
because it has been very
Yes.
much. I don't know
Oh
if,
my
and I think
goodness.
it's something we're looking back at. Like, is this
Yep.
actually different than a helicopter? Like we are, and I don't know if it was a marketing decision at the time, right? Like this is eVTOL, this is electric
Yep.
propulsion, this is an electric drivetrain system, this is
Yep.
distributed electric propulsion, where traditionally helicopters on most VTOL platforms either had one or two main rotors. You have a swash plate.
That's
You're
it.
not using motors, but at the same time, they're all VTOL platforms. And we've, of
They
course,
are.
had a very large portfolio of non helicopter type aircraft that had vertical
Really?
takeoff and landing capability in the 50s, 60s, and later. I mean, even the Chinook or the Sea Knight or the V-22 are not conventional helicopters, right?
They're
A
not.
lot of them have
But
in common is a common propulsion system, turbine engine, and shafts and gearboxes. And what's novel about this new push, which was enabled by new efficiencies in electric drivetrain design, maybe from the car and automobile industry, lighter and more efficient motors. Of course, energy density of lithium ion batteries improved. And so a lot of these pioneers like Joe Ben from Joby and others were like, we could potentially, use these enabling technologies to develop an aircraft that's purely powered by electricity. Um, and that was the start. And we had our first transformative vertical flight event,
yeah.
TVF, in
Yeah.
2014. And back then, this was more of a DARPA type domain. And so we had that first event across the street from DARPA, and we had about 100 people. And at the same time, in parallel, DARPA was funding some of this research. We had Ashish
Of course.
Bagai, who was a University of Maryland grad, the VLARCO there, running that program. And Aurora Flight Sciences was selected to go forward, and they had an
Oh my
electric
gosh. Yes.
system, distributed electric
Yes.
propulsion system.
Yes.
We
Yes.
didn't mature the technology much within the DoD after that. A lot of that was in the private sector. So DARPA and others were kind of like, listen, this private sector is pumping a lot of money here. We don't need to, the DoD doesn't really need to invest in this. We'll track it. And we are still in that position where there isn't really much research in the DoD or DARPA related to this stuff. But of course, VFS was there from the beginning because we're the R&D kind of guys, the engineers. We're looking at even the paper studies and the back of the napkin designs, and we try to foster and
That's true.
excite people about that. So that's a little bit of background on some of the eVTOL. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and you've done a great job. I mean, VFS definitely has been at the forefront. It definitely was one of the enablers. I remember talking to Mike Hirschberg, who 2014, 2015, biggest philosophical questions were what do we call it? UAM, eVTOLs, eVTOLs only. At the time, we didn't really think about too much about eSTOLs. They weren't around or anything like that. One thing that I did notice, and I really enjoyed the fact that you guys yes, you are VTOL, and that's predominantly what you do, but you don't mind talking about the other friends who have only wings. So I thought that was pretty interesting too, because it's a big ecosystem that we're building here. And then you said something that is so true. If I could do it again, how different would it look like? I remember again, talking to Mike 10 years ago. Yes, we'll be flying from building top to building top. And once in a while we land in a parking structure. Well, yeah, all right. That didn't work out well because they're not meant for that, for one thing. But as energy density got better with lithium batteries, you're right, and now power density really more for eVTOLs. Now we're really starting to look beyond that. Obviously, regional air mobility and everything. But you said something that was very interesting. My background is actually in automotive, although flying has always been part of my life. But you're right, we had the same problem in 2008, 2009. We were wondering the car or the infrastructure. All of us knew it was the infrastructure. Money went into the cars, fine. Then we had the charging wars that delayed it
Yeah.
for another 3 years
Yeah.
easily. But I'm glad that over here on the what we now call AAM, Advanced Air Mobility, we are focusing on infrastructure, and hopefully we're not going to get into another charging war. Please work together, and that's something you guys do really well. You bring everybody together. I've had the best times
Yeah.
at your events. They're amazing,
Sure.
absolutely amazing, top
Yeah.
notch.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I don't know if you pull out your crystal ball, but I think we're probably going to repeat some of the same issues that the industry's always
Yeah.
run into, at least in the modern times. Traditionally, I mean, if you look at exactly, if you look at maybe the car, right? And at that time, obviously they weren't looking 5 or 10 years ahead. It was a much different model back then, as far as, oh, even aircraft, like, oh, you need a pilot's license to fly one of these. Yeah, a lot of people are crashing. Maybe we do that next. And it was reactionary versus what we try to
Yes.
do today. Like, all right, what should the infrastructure look like before the aircraft
Yes.
are even built? And it's a tricky
Yes.
problem. And like we would have, I'm assuming early on in the automotive industry days, it's like, where do we put gas stations, right? Like, we need gas stations, or do we do like who knows what they were thinking? Like, all right, everyone just buys gas from the store and brings it to their house and fills up their car from there,
No,
and
it was every 20 miles.
every 20 miles,
That's what yeah, Standard Oil made Ford change from electric cars to gasoline car by promising every 20 miles. Now think about that.
yeah,
If we did that in advanced air mobility, done deal.
yeah.
But you're right. That's a very good point. That's a great
And
point.
there's a cost, and
Yeah.
even with it, like, all right, this makes sense, all right, but who's going to make this initial investment to build all of these, like, gas
Ah,
stations? And candidly, you probably would make incorrect decisions, right? Like, all right, gas stations should all be in the middle of a city. That's where everybody is. It's like, well, actually, let's put them on near off ramps of main roads, and like in those trafficked areas, because of, and put them on corners of streets, and major intersections, because that's where people are going to want to use them. And like, who knows?
absolutely.
It's hard to move a gas station, and it may or may not be difficult to move a vertiport. Once you put the tanks underground,
Yes.
you can't really.
That's it.
That's
That's it.
it. And
Yeah.
I don't know, as far as infrastructure, how oh, actually, yeah, the vertiport doesn't make sense here. We got to move this electrification infrastructure we just set up too, and I don't know what that looks like. So if we are, and that's why it's important for VFS and others to have those serious conversations
Yes.
now, so that we don't make any of those mistakes in the future. Yeah,
Yes, because it will happen. We will, and it's normal to make mistakes. That's how you learn everything. In fact, I'm seeing right now a sort of a second wave of AAM companies out there, startups, and it's really funny. All of them say, "Well, we're not technology driven for one thing. We're demand driven," which is like, yeah,
yeah,
well, duh, shouldn't we all be, right?
yeah,
And you're right, vertiports now are morphing into multi-ports. How can we use regional airports to have eSTOLs, eCTOLs, eVTOLs, drones, you name it, all of that? And I think we're seeing a coherence slowly, or maybe an integration into this greater innovative mobility platform, whatever you want to call it. Strangely enough, we kind of did away with trains. We kind of did away with more or less trying to do away with cars. We're doing away with everything, and all of a
yeah.
sudden we realize no, 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 no. No, it works really well together. Electric boats are taking off too. I really am excited about that part too. So
Any sustainable
yeah.
transportation mechanism is great. Obviously, even just for the smog. You're looking at LA during COVID without cars driving around, it was beautiful. You
Oh,
could see.
it was
I've
amazing.
taken helicopter flights in San Bernardino, and they
Mm,
told me, like, hey, you used to be able to see LA from the San Bernardino region, but you can't
yeah.
anymore because of, it's a little,
Nope.
the little bit of smog. LA is kind of set at the same time. There's not as much circulation out, so the air just sits there,
True.
like some other cities. But yeah, be one benefit of general
Yeah.
sustainable aviation not running on their own internal combustion engines. Yeah,
Yeah. Gosh, I remember flying into LA in the 80s, and virtually you would hit a thick layer of fog, and it
yeah,
was just this brownish, ugly thing. We lived in Long Beach, so yeah, you're right. COVID was amazing, crystal clear skies. It was absolutely fantastic. And another words that you're using right now, and I'm happy to hear you say, because it's such an ugly word these days, is sustainability, and it's something that I for the last few years I've been pushing maybe the boundaries of sustainability. Sustainability is not just green, but it's also a sustainable business model. You guys need to have a sustainable business model. You walked away from big companies because you didn't like the business model. You creating a startup, with something brand new. You need a different business model. So we need to redefine sustainability. That's for sure.
There's lots of different definitions depending on the application of the word. If you're talking to the
Yeah.
Army, sustainability is
Yes.
critical, especially
Yep.
from a financial
Yep.
perspective. And those are things that I'd like to see us prioritize.
Yes.
Understanding in the future of the Army, the future of our military, and our use of helicopters or
Yeah.
otherwise. We may not see another helicopter introduced for another 40 years, is what I'm saying. After now the V-280 Valor, maybe the Army
I
doesn't.
think so.
And with that, okay,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
what do we
Yeah.
work on? What do we do? What do we care about? And it is a sustainability model and looking at the existing fleet and how do we reduce the cost of sustaining these aircraft? What projects can we start up? And it even puts a substantial investment behind because there's a tail end down the road. How do we make more sustainable rotor blades? Maybe we look at our different
Yes.
subsystems and redesign some of them to be more reliable. But specific to electrification of aviation, sustainability comes from um, not necessarily having to burn fossil fuels to generate energy for transportation. Aviation is tricky, right? Because if a commercial jet
Very.
needs to burn quite a bit of fuel and needs quite a bit of energy to transport goods and people, and but there's a roadmap of how we could get there, and understandably,
There
even
is.
the incumbent legacy electric aircraft, VTOL aircraft, um, their payload fraction isn't exceptional. Um,
Nope.
you don't lose as a good aerospace engineer. We look at an aircraft, and the weight of the aircraft changes over the flight as you burn fuel.
Yes. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's not a benefit you get in electrification of aviation. You're the same weight regardless of when you took off or land,
Yep.
and you don't get to take advantage of some of those benefits too. So those are other factors. Yeah.
On the flip side, you don't need to circle for 10 minutes to dump electrons too. So yeah, I mean, it's there are pros and cons. Yeah, so there you go. But there are a lot of pros and cons, and it's obvious. But I think you're right. What unites us is efficiency. We want things to be a little bit more efficiency. You were talking about EVs. I saw some really wonderful numbers. So 1/3 of the gasoline tank that we have in cars ends up actually moving the car, or moving the car forward. Right, 2/3 is lost in heat and friction. 80 to 92% of electrons move a car forward. So that's the kind of efficiency we're all reaching for, especially in the air. And I'm really glad that we're going after, the 2.5% of emissions in the world by focusing on aviation. That is the hardest thing to do something about. The maritime world might be almost 2/3, but that's got to be fairly easy to change. Aviation is a different story. So I'm glad that we're taking on this challenge right now. Um, Tell us a little bit more about, how do you see now the industry today, having evolved from this really quaint idea of, oh, we're gonna magically hoppity hop on top of buildings, to now we have a much more serious infrastructure. We're embracing other modes of transportation. How do you see it from your angle at VFS?
So yeah, I do, as executive director, have a good what's the word, like a like above the clouds looking down,
Yeah,
excuse the
53,000
pun,
feet.
3,000 foot perspective, and I get to work with a lot of these
Yep.
companies
Yep.
across, and I hear criticisms, and I hear you know
Well,
unfettered support, and I'm a realist. I do,
yes.
as a practically trained engineer, we can see who is maybe smoke and mirrors, and
Yes.
who is legitimately making substantial
Yes.
progress. I don't think people appreciate or understand how difficult designing an aircraft is, and I give a lot of our members credit.
Yes.
I celebrate them.
Yes.
I'm like, listen, my idols are Charlie Command, Igor Sikorsky. Some people don't even know these
Yes.
names. That were
I know.
Frank Robinson.
Yep.
They've done
Yep.
something that large
Yep.
companies couldn't do. Now, how many
Couldn't do, and they
aircraft,
were small companies.
right,
Yes, that's a good
and
point.
small
Yeah.
companies, how many aircraft, how many helicopters has Boeing designed and produced? I think zero.
Yeah,
They went
absolutely.
after that Black Hawk contract, and they've worked on certain aircraft, but the Apache was designed by McDonnell Douglas. The Chinook was designed by Vertol, and so the V-22 was a
Airbus, same
joint
thing.
collaborative, with Bell. But
Yeah.
I'm not trying to. I mean,
Yeah.
Boeing's a wonderful member, but I'm just trying to
Yeah, no, no,
touch
Boeing's a
on
great
how
member. I mean, I'm
difficult it
saying,
is.
yeah, same thing with Airbus. I mean, Alouettes and all of that, it transformed into
And
what we have now,
Eurocopter,
and
and
it's wonderful,
yeah,
but it's a more of a consolidation of more than anything. Absolutely. You're right. Yeah.
yeah,
No,
and
we're not criticizing Boeing. My God, I think they have
it's
enough of
hard.
that. That's not what we're here to do.
You
Yeah,
have
it's
some of these
hard. Yes,
brilliant
it is.
people, like for example,
Yeah.
Charlie Command was a Sikorsky engineer, and he was brilliant, and he was getting into some disagreements and wanted to do his own thing, and he left the company, started his own company, was carving his wooden blades by hand and balancing them himself. And he had a very innovative intermeshing rotor design that was and still is the K-Max is still
Yeah,
has the best
K-Max.
payload fraction of any helicopter
Yes.
that exists
Yes.
today.
Yes.
And
Yes. Wow.
no one's been able to. I like to actually look at vertical flight from the misfortune side of it. Like, how little progress have we made, guys? How much potential is still out there, to the point where the private
Yeah.
sector can do a lot of this in the eVTOL sector. And we need to change that. I mean, as VFS executive director, there is a lot of still untapped potential in VTOL,
Absolutely.
and so that's something we're
Absolutely.
trying to resolve. But what was your original question? Kind of went off on a tangent there.
No, but you know what? It got me to another question now that I
Yeah,
think of it, which is exactly how we do it, the ways we move, right? We start in one direction and we end up in
yeah,
another. But you're right. So one of the questions was always, and same thing with EVs, right? Are we seeing a revolution or an evolution? I tend to sort of lean on the evolution side of things, despite having a different powertrain or mobility train. It's more of an evolution, right? I mean, we started with chariots and, on horses, drawn
yeah.
carriages, and then we, decided metal wheels on metal rails and the steam engine, which is,
Hmm.
by the way, still the most energy condensed motor that we've ever created, strangely enough, right? These little motors can move
Yeah,
thousands of tons, right? But it's still an evolution, right? Because that was an evolution of a carriage, and the car is an evolution of a carriage. And except for airplanes, I guess airplanes technically you could say are an evolution of a flying carriage, but yeah, the more that I think about it, I don't really think it's a revolution. I think it's a technical evolution, although it is a lifetime revolution for sure. It's opening up little doors that we just couldn't do with a traditional helicopter, with traditional airplanes. And think of all these little small propellers that we used to have in
yeah.
Hawaii, for instance, right? That was now replaced by 737 A320s. Oh God, they only go up to 10,000 feet, maybe a little bit more, then come down again all the time. Whoa, that's some serious wear and tear that they're not designed for. So yeah, where do we start the revolution? And maybe is it more of an evolution? I don't know. I'm sort of
I think
I lean towards evolution.
you generally buy yourself into the portfolio of transit because you're a lower cost and more sustainable option. And that's generally always the way, especially a capitalist country
Yeah,
would
that's
go.
true.
And
Yeah,
obviously, the car initially wasn't a better alternative than a horse, even at a cost perspective. But it didn't take too long for the car to. I mean, they weren't, and it took decades for them to become more reliable. I mean, I remember even as a kid, our car breaking down, and that
yes,
never happens, to the point where they don't even have shoulders on the highways anymore, because cars don't
that's
break down
true.
anymore. Well, a horse wouldn't break down. That would be a rare
Yeah, horse
occurrence.
would break down. Yes,
And so, but at the same time, and this is a general concern I have, but something that we can work towards resolving, is the cost. The cost of vertical flight is substantial. Not just
it
forget
is.
eVTOL. The largest operator of helicopters in the world. Who is the largest operator of helicopters in the world?
I don't know. I was gonna say I know the sixth largest, but I'm not really sure which one
The
is on
United
top
States
of it.
Army. The United Let's cut to the chase. The United States Army is the largest operator of helicopters in the world, right?
Makes
As an
sense. Makes
entity,
perfect sense.
thousands of helicopters they operate. Um, they're enabled by um, the defense
Yeah.
budget, and it's not
Yeah.
cheap to fly a helicopter, and
No.
you need a reason to fly a helicopter, especially in the civil sector. there's got to be a business model there. And there's different consortiums that help support the cost, hospitals that help support the cost if they're
Yep.
transporting patients. Because it's not
Yeah.
cheap. And now you're introducing a new aircraft type, I suppose you could call it eVTOL,
Yeah.
that do
Of
promise
course.
potentially some cost savings, but
Yep.
it's still going to be more expensive than an
Potentially.
Uber, right? And so that's where
Yeah.
we need to close as well. Like, the business model needs to close. People don't need to know what they're going to be flying in, how they got there. People
They
just
don't
want to
care.
be able to book a trip, and they're not really
That's
going to
right.
necessarily want to or care about
That
choosing the mode of transportation.
that's
Sometimes an
right.
Uber might be the best way in a car. Sometimes you may decide, for example, I did a day trip to California, and I was going to UC Irvine. And the Uber took about a little over 2 hours from LAX to UC Irvine.
Yeah.
Now, if I
That's
was
right.
booking a trip through Delta, through United, I don't say, okay, I booked my flight, and then how do I get to UC Irvine? Does Delta have a? I say, I'm coming from DC. I'm going to UC Irvine. You get me there. And then it tells
What's
me,
the
all
best way
right,
to do
you're
it?
going to do a layover in LAX. You're going to get on your eVTOL, and you're going to take you to that vertiport at near UC Irvine. And then maybe there's an Uber waiting for you. And that's the trip you book.
Or a high speed boat, or whatever. It
Whatever it
doesn't
might
really
be.
matter. The
You go to a
train,
port,
whatever. It
a high
doesn't really
speed boat
matter. But
takes
yes.
you.
Yep.
I mean,
Whatever.
I see models all over the place where
Yes.
profitable models
Yes.
like
Yes.
take
Yep.
people from Hyannisport or Woods Hole to Martha's Vineyard in Nantucket, and
Right.
instead
Exactly.
of taking
Yeah.
the fast ferry, and
Yep.
it's even
Yep.
quieter, right? Because the fast ferry from Nantucket to Hyannisport, they're starting to cut it off after
Oh,
6 p.m. because they sound the
yes.
horn, and people don't like to hear that. So,
Nope.
so they're like, all right, no
Rightfully
more
so.
boats after 6. And they don't want the airports to grow because of the noise as well. And that's a
No.
big
No.
part
No. No. No.
of
No.
the selling point of an electric aircraft. It's not that loud, and you might not
It's
even
not
hear
that
it.
loud. Yep, we've seen them fly. They're really way much quieter. The only thing you hear is the chaser. I don't know if Mike told you we went to see Joby fly years ago. So we saw it take off like the S4, and yeah, you can hear a whirl, and it was not bad. I mean, I kind of like that noise, but I promise you, after 200-300 feet, you don't hear a darn thing. But you do hear the chaser. And then at one point, a big Leonardo came in for landings, and I got to tell you, what was the only thing you heard? The Leonardo, of course, it was riding hard on its rotors, right? Obviously, but yeah,
Yeah,
I think, and I
it's
think
the
you said it really
quality of the
well. It
noise
is.
too, not even the decibels,
It's
the type of
it's
noise
the
it is.
quality of the noise,
Yeah,
exactly, and how the noise propagates. It's very different from
yeah,
propellers give you sort of a funnel. Yeah, rotors push it out. It's what it is. But I think I think you said it. I think there's definitely a push, and I've noticed it the last 2 years. Most of my talks have been more about let's not just focus on eVTOLs and vertiports because that is really hard to make sense out of it. Go and look in the railroad industry, right? Freight makes a lot of sense. You can make a lot of money with it. Passenger, that's a different story. That's why we have Amtrak. But I'll tell you one thing: the SNCF and any other train systems in Europe too, they don't make money that much on very very very
sure.
razor thin margins on that.
Margins.
So
Yeah,
we need to move, and that's what I've noticed in the last 2 years is we're moving more towards an integrative mobility platform. And like you said, the 20-year-olds right now, they just want to tap and be done.
sure.
They don't care if it's a nuclear submarine. Who cares? They just want to
Yeah,
get there. That's all. And yeah, I
yeah,
think that's the one thing that we need to yeah. So what we used to tinker with carburetors when we were younger. Well, no more. Who cares? Now it's modules, modules,
sure.
modules. So we got to get that mind frame into the whole
Well, and it's a
picture
chicken
again.
and the egg
Absolutely.
problem too, because aviation is a very niche market in that aircraft are designed for a specific mission. And if we decide, right, it's automated transport of cargo containers, an electric aircraft can do that at a really low price
Yep.
point. I'm told by
Absolutely.
Beta that they are at a lower price point than
Yeah.
the Cessna Caravan for maybe a similar payload. Like that would be exceptional.
That's amazing.
And
Yeah.
but with that said, you do want to optimize the design around your application. And so I hope that, we do come to closure on, all right, this makes sense, at least right now. This makes a lot of sense. We are spending a lot of
I
money
think.
in prototype mode right now
Yeah.
and
Yes.
for
Yes.
proof of concept. And
Yes.
there would be continued iterative design changes and even minor changes to an aircraft could lead to substantial testing, flight testing, and that's a cost. So that's where, it takes generations even for us for the regular civil AV. Like, all right, yeah, an aircraft is a cylinder with wings, and you put the engines on the wings. That's the best business model. It's the cheapest way to build an aircraft and maintain it and to get people around. And that can take decades. We were sticking the engine on the tail. We were sticking the engine and wherever, right? Along the fuselage, and like, actually, this makes sense. And
This makes sense
we're
too.
still in that mode with the eVTOL where, all right, how many rotors? How many turn?
Right. Right.
What does the fuselage look like? What's the outer mold line look like? What materials are we using? And
Yes.
we can get to a point where we can make anything fly. We can make a rock fly.
We can make a brake fly.
But how efficient is it? What's its purpose? And I was laughing because I was reading an article, or it was like it popped up, and it was like how many Japanese jets could have been, or not jets at the time, during Pearl Harbor. How many
Right.
F-35s would it take? How many aircraft could you take out? And like the answer is like
Yes.
probably like 10. Because F-35 is not designed to shoot down 1940s
It's not.
piston engine
No, it's
aircraft,
not.
right?
It's not.
It's like
It's
people
not.
kind of get confused. Like, no, it's not designed for that.
Unless it kind of went
That's
like
not the
this.
application.
I don't know.
It would have
Yeah.
to maybe
Yeah.
fly
Yeah.
into them, maybe,
Exactly.
because the Gatling gun on the F-35 only has a few hundred rounds, and you can carry like four
That's.
missiles.
Yeah.
So like, maybe you take
Yeah.
out 10.
Yeah.
The
At
A-10
one
though, the
time,
A-10 could
one
take out a
go.
few, but
That's
every aircraft
that's
designed for
that's a
something different.
Yeah, and that's actually really interesting what you're saying here is because I'm starting to also see and having spoken to Mark Allman not too long ago at
Yeah,
Electra, he was really we were talking about the performance and the envelope of the aircraft, and I started noticing, wow, each of these aircraft, whether you take sky drives, no wings,
yeah,
10-minute, 15-minute
yeah.
hops, perfect, two-seater, one pilot, two-seater, or the bigger ones, four seats with wings and everything. Then you get into the eSTOL, and then you get into eCTOL. A lot of them pretty much overlap at one point or another, not to say that they can do the core work of what the others or the core operations
Yeah.
what the others can do, but a lot of them kind of, overlap. And so about a year or so ago, I was talking to Rex Alexander and Clint Harper. I was like, it's crazy. We've had STOL ports since the 70s. The military has operated STOL ports since the 70s. Why don't we have say 400-500 feet eSTOL port where you can have 2-3 TLOFs in it, and then the middle one can have a FATO, yay big, who cares? So I think we need to more and more see it more in an inclusive way. And then each of these aircraft has a specific operation that it can do within that. And of course, you know what's going to happen in 40 years. We're all going to go towards one big platform. We're going to say this is the most efficient ways of manufacturing it. It's going to be based on financial realities. But at least now we have this plethora of different designs, and I'm excited about everything out there. Good Lord, have you checked out Fly Now? Did you see how that little one Potter is counter rotating rotors? That's
I
it,
don't
done
think
deal.
so. I have to look that one
Oh,
up.
check
Fly
it out.
now.
We just interviewed Yvonne Winter, and I looked at it and I thought, if I really have to go into the future and think of like a futuristic, almost Jetson-ish aircraft. It's a pod. It looks like a teardrop, like this, and it has counter-rotating rotors. Done deal. The attitude, always perfect, whether it takes off or it lands. And I was like, all right, now we're getting into even more efficient, and now we're getting down to something that's very efficient for its type of operation, although it can do a few more other things. So, but it's interesting. And I thought there's not that many ways of innovating an eVTOL platform anymore. Well, these guys came around and said, sure, there is. And it's simpler, by the way. And of course, we're getting into that more and
Oh,
more.
there's
So,
still, I mean, investment might not be there, but there's certainly still a lot of untapped
yes.
opportunity in eVTOL, different designs that could still be on the table. I'm always surprised
Yeah.
to see a concept like that. Makes a lot of sense. I would have thought. I never thought of that myself. Me personally, I think it would make a lot of sense to stick electric aircraft in a vehicle and kind of have a
Yeah.
combination where it launches
Yes.
off of a car. You get picked up by the truck and it has an eVTOL in
Absolutely.
it, and then you get in the eVTOL. It takes you to a safe place to take off, and then you land on another vehicle that takes you to your destination. So as an executive, or
It's,
you never have to get out, wait in line. You're
yeah.
just sitting
Yeah.
and doing working, and you get to
That's,
point A to point B, and whatever the design would
yeah.
have to look like to fit or fold or bend or to then those are engineering problems, and who knows what.
Those are engineering problems. Yeah. It's funny because in 2006, I was writing about this fictional fellow who's lives in 2075, 2090, doesn't really matter. Wakes up in his apartment, goes to his office, and all of a sudden he's like, "Oh shoot, I got to be somewhere." But the office comes down the building, goes on a skateboard, starts driving. And then he can get into a tub, go on water.
Okay.
A clip-on bunch of propellers come on, and then and lift it somewhere else. But yeah, we're gonna get in there, right? What's the movie? I keep on forgetting, with Harrison Ford, the futuristic movie where he hunts replicates and things like that. I mean, that's exactly it. I mean, I think
Blade
it's
Runner?
already
You're talking about
being
Blade
written.
Runner?
Blade Runner, thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Blade Runner. We've seen those cars flying, and it's like, wow, yes, absolutely. And it is slowly happening. Not
It's
that
fun to see
WAL-E
the
is doing it.
sci-fi. I wonder who they consult. Avatar had some VTOL
Yes.
aircraft.
Avatar had some detail, but I mean, if you read
Yeah.
the original Bradbury Asimov and everything, they've talked about all that. Eating tofu. By the way, yeah, they already were thinking about that in the 50s. So it's already written. It's just Star Trek wrote a lot of things. In fact, I was watching a Star Trek on my iPad, and then I noticed Nurse Chappelle was using an iPad or a tablet of some sort. I
Yeah.
was like, wow, they saw it.
And
So
simulations make a lot of sense if we can, whether
yes,
it's in media
yes,
or in games, you know,
yeah,
people playing games and taking advantage of, whether it's transporting people or it's a war game. I'm not sure if we're collecting data from that, if it's relevant or not, but those are all, there are people working on some of that, like simulating
yeah,
obviously different flight paths and
yeah.
minimizing the time and maybe to be able to generate a cost for certain trips, and that's one way. That's one good way to do it.
It's Yeah,
To
it's been
forecast.
talked about. I don't know if it's been done. I know that the military had its hands into a lot of games, a lot of war games to recruit. But yeah, wouldn't it be great if Flight Simulator, Microsoft Flight Simulator, what's the other one? I always forget, Plane X or Airplane X or whatever it is.
Yeah,
But that would be great to really gather some data. Of course, asking users if they want to, that kind of
yeah,
stuff, and everything starts in the imagination. I mean,
yeah,
my gosh, I mean, this was something I've lived through 3 or 4 disruptive technologies in my lifetime. This was a dream once a long time ago. It's a reality now for
yeah.
$50, right?
But yeah,
So
and
it
I think
happened.
people to do can forecast. Like I was one of those where I had a pocket PC that what's the name of the company made? It's a Canadian company with the parrot on it. But they had a pocket PC that they had developed. You still needed to use a stylus, but this was me in like maybe high school, and before the iPhone came out, and because I knew, and there was an attachment where you could get internet, like, and I didn't buy that, but it technically existed. It just didn't exist in the form function that the iPhone was able to do. And that's
Yeah,
just as important. It's we're humans, we're not robots, and
right.
sometimes half the battle is just making someone feel comfortable with the product or making it ergonomic, or the
Yes.
human factors element is just as critical as the
It's
functionality.
just as critical. And that's what we're going after. We're really helping the human here, not technology, not a financial model or anything like that. Ultimately, we want humans to either have a easier life, more productive, ideally, right, or move easier through this, 3D space kind of things. Usually by now we start asking the more personal questions like, are you crazy? What are you doing working in this insane industry of ours? Tell us about your motivation. What gets you out of bed in the morning?
Uh, you know, I wanted to be a priest when I was younger, and I was an altar boy, and I had a
Interesting.
little bit of a calling, and I'm Greek Orthodox, and so we can get married.
Okay.
And actually, the seminary in Boston, there's a singles dorm and there's a married dorm, because a lot of the guys will
Yeah.
get married before they are ordained. You have to get married before you're ordained in the Orthodox Church,
Yeah, I
and
love I love Greek Orthodoxy, by the way. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
and so I took a tour of the uh, of the seminary, and I asked, like, "Oh, do you have math classes? Do you offer any science classes as well?" They're like, "Not really," and I had a gift for the sciences and the maths. Right, it's one of the you know ace a test,
Yep.
aced an SAT, and so that was something that I was good at. And so I think at that point I was like, maybe my true calling is engineering or something, and maybe I'll just go to engineering school. But I'm drawing parallels there because I had a calling to help people.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
enjoy
Yeah.
helping people.
Yeah.
and just for altruistic reasons. I go whatever I can do to make your life better, to help support you. That's something that I enjoy. And through a nonprofit, through something like VFS, I'm enabled, and that's why the scholarships have been extremely important to me, helping
Yeah.
support the students' STEM opportunities, just help fostering their, just making their life better, making their life easier and track towards, you know, making the right decisions, whether it be in engineering or otherwise, and even financially helping them. I created my own scholarship to, like, I put my own money where my mouth is. I created the executive director scholarship this year, and so we'll do that for as long as
Good
I'm
for
not in debt.
you.
We'll do that
That's
every
right.
year.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you
And
have to take care of yourself first.
but yeah, I mean, that's part of what I really enjoy about running a nonprofit, is just being able to help people. And I go back to our core that, VFS is a
Yeah.
501(c)(3). We're a professional
Yep.
society, but we're also philanthropic and charitable. And that's been part of my push, because it's not just, advocacy to ensure the Army sets aside a certain amount of money for this PE and during the palm drill to
Yep.
make sure that Boeing makes whatever amount. And I mean, they're all doing pretty well this past
Yep.
year. Vertical flight, not so much. Some of the basic research and university spending is cut a little bit. That's something we're trying to
Yeah.
voice some concerns over.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
that's me, I suppose, and why I really enjoy VFS. Yeah,
So I'm kind of smiling because I studied a little bit of Greek Orthodoxy, and I found out that some of these little faraway island little monasteries are actually very interesting because they do a lot of research into meditation, reincarnation, breathing exercises, and things like that. So you might have found, had you gone maybe one or two more islands away, you might have found that one who would have studied, I don't know, astronomy or something like that. Who knows? So their loss, our gain, perfectly okay with that
yeah,
one. But that's really good. And I like what you said. I think again with Mike, we visited Ames, NASA Ames,
yeah,
a few years ago, and we were in that wind tunnel, and all of a sudden there were only three guys, and we were about 10 people right in there. And I turned around, I'm like, what the heck's going on? And one of the ladies came in, and she's like, we're 62% strong. And I was just thinking of the whole STEM idea. And I asked her, I said, how'd you get involved in that? She goes, that one teacher that changed my life, that one science teacher, that one math teacher, whatever it is. I had Becky Ludi from Emory Riddle not too long ago on this podcast. And she said the same thing. We got to reach them in not kindergarten. Obviously, that would be great, but middle school, right before high school. That's when we can do a lot of good work. So I hope that
yeah.
we can start to reach out more and more to these kids to tell them that, hey, man, airspace is wonderful. Flying is amazing. It's actually very efficient. A lot of people think that flying is not efficient. I'm always thinking, where do you get that? Show me the numbers because I don't know where you're getting those numbers from. Okay. That's not true. It's very efficient. So,
Maybe not
so
as
it is. Yeah.
much as a diesel engine, large freight ships, whatever they're called,
No,
transport per mile
freight
out
freight
of
ships are not.
as
Yeah, no,
efficient
no.
as
You know what?
aviation.
Actually, no, they're not efficient because they're fighting through constant water. No, the most efficient is rail, right? I mean, no
Sure.
friction, metal on metal, can't beat that. And again, the only thing that draws a lot of diesel into that is the starting of the engines. You know that they run two-stroke diesel engines, those locomotives. Don't know
Diesel
why.
engines are very
First,
efficient. Yeah.
diesel engines are super efficient, but two strokes I had never heard. And the first hybrids was actually GE, and the Europeans were making diesel hybrid electric locomotives way back then. So
Sure.
we're
Yes.
revisiting. Yep,
And
we're
that's,
revisiting
yeah.
it.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's been, I think it's funny too, because I think people have a misconception about propulsion in general, and they think they see jet or think jet, and for whatever reason they think efficiency. A jet engine is very inefficient. Turbine engines are not the
Yep.
best way to generate power,
No.
although their application is their power to weight ratio, and for a specific fuel consumption, a specific mass of fuel, you can actually generate thousands of pounds of thrust, which is what an aircraft would need. It's not as efficient as an internal combustion engine, or certainly a diesel engine, specific fuel consumption wise. People kind of like, well, thermal efficiencies are. I'm like, okay. Uh,
That's pretty darn important. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
interesting.
I think until we have Star Trek war bubbles right now, I think we're doing pretty good with what we have. In fact, I mean, Vertigo Aero, Eric was talking about, at one point I think he was using diesel, and he said, it's the most energy dense any kind of generator that we've have right now. And I was like, wow. And it is a small, I mean, obviously it's
Yeah.
bigger than that, but it's a small block. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting what these guys
And
have
we
built
are
too. So
very bullish on the hybrid propulsion systems, whether it's diesel or maybe
yes,
turbine. And that would be
yes,
even a help. That would be the next step, maybe logical step to at least the military becoming more interested
yep,
in having some more
yeah,
electrons in their aircraft. I don't know if the
yep,
military, the army, are going to feel purely electric aircraft anytime soon, and it depends on the application. But
right,
they are very much interested in these hybrid propulsion systems. They can generate a little bit more power, and
yes.
that's something of importance.
Well, and you and I, without saying any, we're not naming any names, but a lot of our friends in the industry are working with the DoD. By the way, we
Yeah.
just had Dash 2 also explain how all of this works, how you go to the DoD and what you can expect and what you should not expect, by the way, because there's a lot of expectations that are not realistic when it comes to the DoD. But yeah, a lot of the companies that we know very well are working with the DoD, are tweaking their platform to adapt for their needs. And eVTOLs are quiet, right? Okay, you can still bring a lot of things to a lot of really hard to reach situations, but that's also good for excuse me, forest fires, for military, for police application, ambulance
Yeah,
applications, and that's the whole thing. It's not
absolutely.
dual use anymore; it's like
Yeah.
quadruple, quintuple use these days. So we're getting towards the end of the hour here. Is there any kind of message that you would like to leave our listeners and our watchers with? I'll stop at that because if not, I'm going to compound questions again.
Well, maybe I'll speak to, depending on how large your audience is, but I think one of the struggles we've had is public acceptance of certain types of aviation. Here in the DC area, at least in Northern Virginia, one of the number one complaints of our constituents in this district is helicopter noise. And obviously, with the incident over the Potomac with the Black Hawk, there is a lot of there's a lot of traffic. And in particular, I mean, it's more the noise, it's not the visual pollution, but we have a lot of air traffic in this region. And I understand that concern. And public acceptance is critical to the future of any type of aviation endeavor. Even the turboprop aircraft, even if they were just as efficient as a turbofan, public acceptance wasn't there. People didn't like to see the prop spinning. And that's why you don't really see many turboprop engines in civil aviation. It's not because of any engineering challenges, it was public acceptance of that. And so we want to educate people that vertical flight needs investment. But at the same time, we are seeing some great strides, especially in the private sector. We haven't been dedicating as much investment in vertical flight. Some of the greatest accomplishments we've made in vertical flight occurred decades ago. And we're making some incremental improvements, but there's still a lot of potential and potential that could alleviate some concerns that folks have, whether it comes to safety or noise, vibrations or otherwise, and even cost. And so, we're begging for help in this industry. We have quite a few challenges. That's why I got into engineering. I'm actually not a big aviation buff. I just really enjoy problem solving. And a lot
Yes.
of students enjoy, and it's always funny to get the question like, "You studied aerospace engineering? Are you a pilot?" It's like, no, I don't
Oh,
really even like aircraft that much. It's not like I'm sitting at home in my free
yeah.
time looking at pictures of helicopters, right? But it's a very rewarding and stimulating domain, and there's a lot of great problems to solve, and there's still lots of really interesting problems that you can solve and to support that industry. And so, it's maybe my pitch here is to gain and garner more public acceptance of helicopters in general, but also
Yep.
eVTOL. There's a lot of things that they can do. The first time you see a lung being transported by eVTOL to save somebody's life, you see that in the air, and it looks like an angel
Wow.
when you really think about it.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
understood that, then I think they'd be more willing to accept the great things that VTOL can do. And so we're making strides there, and we're trying to help make that message clear. But that's what I would pass on.
Yeah, I think you said it really well, and I think maybe just a little passage from Steve Jobs to move beyond the acceptance into the desirability. I'm looking for public desirability. When I look at an eVTOL, it's damn desirable. I want to be in there. I want to fly that efficiently, that quietly, that more sustainably. So I really want to. want to push that needle out there because it is definitely, it needs to be done. Angelo, thank you very much for coming on the pod. You have an open invitation to come back whenever, talk about whatever. We want to hear more also about forums and everything that you
Of
guys are
course.
doing, because these are absolutely terrific, your publications and all. And just to say, we love, and when I say we, I really mean a lot of us love what you're doing at VFS, where you're bringing, we're excited about the next 10 years and whatever lies beyond that. So thank you for coming with us. Thank you for
Thank
being
you
with
for
us.
having me.
And for Absolutely, absolutely, and you come back whenever you want. I mean, it's an open invitation. We'll remind you every once in a while, obviously, right? But for those of you who are watching, please, like, share, subscribe. Let us know what you thought. Has Angelo changed your mind about anything? Has your understanding of advanced air mobility changed in any ways? Those are the things we'd like to hear. And in the meantime, we look forward to talking with you next week again. And have a safe flight if you are flying, or what do they say? Safe flights and soft landings. I like that one. I'm keeping that one.
Absolutely.